and from Mr. Tambo as well, and Mr. Mfutu will be arriving late, Chair. Those are the apologies I have. Thanks.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Agenda having been adopted, I would like to welcome the Minister, Minister Parks Tau, Deputy Minister Zuko Kodlimpi, the DG, Mr. Hamilton, the DM, Abrahams. Apologies for the slight delay. I went to a wrong venue, the original venue, so I had to walk and exercise. Colleagues, on the 28th of January 2026, the committee received a memorandum from the film and television sector, as well as the audiovisual sector of South Africa, outlining a severe and escalating crisis in the film and television production sector. This submission indicated a prolonged administrative dysfunctional and uncertainty related to the incentive program, which had resulted in the stalled local and international production, a significant contraction in the industry activity, widespread job and income losses across the value chain, and declining foreign direct investment and investor confidence. The committee is concerned about the broader economic implication as evidence presented to it reflect that the film and television sector incentive historically contribution to economic growth, employment, transformation, and spillover benefit into related sectors such as tourism, hospitality, construction, professional services. At the same time, the recent declines in production activity, employment, and gross value add have been linked to administrative delays, funding constraint, and uncertainty surrounding the reliability of the incentive framework. In light of the above, the committee has scheduled this meeting to engage the TTIC on the concern raised by the film and television industry as our stakeholder, and would like to take this opportunity to welcome the leadership of the institution, of the stakeholders, and thank them. I know that they would have given us about 10 days to meet, but we had to make sure that we align the diaries. Thank you, and you're welcome. We will also take this opportunity to give the organizers an opportunity to brief the committee on the concern on audiovisual film and television sector. I would like now to invite the minister and the delegation to talk to us with regards to the presentation that they have prepared, which has been shared across by all members. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, honorable members, deputy ministers and colleagues. Deputy Minister Kodlimpi leads us on the sector, so if he may lead us on the presentation, thanks.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Good morning to Honorable Chairperson and members of the committee. The department appreciates the opportunity to appear before the committee today regarding one of the programs administered by us, which is the Film and Television Production Incentive. And we do acknowledge receipt of the memorandum, which was submitted on the 29th of January 2026 by the following organizations: it was Save South Africa Films Job Coalition, Animation South Africa, Independent Producers Organization, Personal
Recording
Managers
in progress.
Association, the Creative 20 South Africa, South African Guild of Actors, the South African Guide of Editors, the South African Stunt Association, South African Society of Cinematographers, South African Performing Artists Managers Association, South African Screen Federation, Soweto Film Festival, and Writers Guild of South Africa. Now, the department welcomes the engagement reflected in the memorandum and recognizes it as part of the democratic process and stakeholder participation in policymaking and implementation. The Film and TV Adjudication Committee last convened on the 24th of March 2024, during which decisions with financial implications were approved. A subsequent meeting was held on the 30th of May 2024, at which only non-financial decisions were taken. Thereafter, all committee meetings were on hold due to the unavailability of budget to commit further on projects, which would have been a contravention of Public Finance Management Act. At the time, the contingent liability stood at approximately 2.1 billion rands, as disclosed in the annual financial statements for the year ended March 2024. Following the suspension of the adjudication meetings, the department continued to process and pay valid claims with the objective of reducing the contingent liability. From September 2025 to date, the contingent liability has shown a consistent downward trend to 473 million rands, which is the amount owed to approved projects. Now, Honorable Chair, the easiest solution that the department could have embarked on, and which was weighed, would have been to suspend the program altogether until we resolve the funding problem. But the department recognized the potential contribution and impact that the sector has in the economy, and we decided to continue looking for possible solutions that could sustain the sector beyond the current budgetary constraints. As the program was not suspended, applications continued to be received, and as a result, unprocessed applications are currently estimated at approximately 1.2 billion rands, an amount that significantly exceeds the program's typical annual allocation. Now, this backlog will place immediate pressure on the 2027-2028 financial year allocation once the contingent liability is cleared. In its continued efforts to look for additional funds, the department had engaged the National Treasury to assist with funding for the services sector, both the film and the global business services. Other institutions such as the Unemployment Insurance Fund and the National Lotteries Commission were engaged, and we could not succeed. The department wishes to reassert that no claims have been withheld by the department, except for those that do not comply with the prescribed requirements or were submitted as incomplete. The relevant teams remain in continuous engagement with claimants in order to address outstanding issues and facilitate payment where applicable. Now, the memorandum from the Save SA Film Jobs Coalition raises the following demands, which will be elaborated in the presentation by the team. The first demand is meeting with the DTIC leadership. The second one is the immediate resumption of adjudication committee meetings. The third one is an establishment of working groups to reform the incentive. Related to that is an establishment of an online system for applicants to track applications and claims. The other one would be the establishment of an animation and documentary film incentive as part of the adjudication process. The fourth one is to have regular workshops on guidelines interpretation. The fifth demand is priority in application approvals. The sixth one is transparency in adjudication committee meetings. The seventh demand is an investigation into mismanagement at the department. The eighth one is for financial agencies, especially the IDC and the NEF, to establish a dedicated film fund. The ninth one is a reduction in red tape in terms of the application, approval, and disbursement processes. Now, Honorable Chair, we've noted the industry's concerns regarding delays, adjudication processes, backlogs, and communication around the film and television production incentive. And we understand the anxiety this uncertainty creates for producers, workers, and investors, and we take these concerns very seriously. At the same time, we have a responsibility to ensure that public funds are administered with strong governance, accountability, and long-term sustainability. In this regard, work is underway within the department to strengthen systems, improve administration, and enhance transparency. The department's success in administering the incentive created a massive demand with limited resources, which are continuously declining. The reality is that the department, or government broadly, has no additional funding available to fund all productions being produced in the country at a go. The incentive in its very nature is a temporary intervention with specified set outcomes. Now, honorable members, the department's approach is guided by the Industrial Policy Framework and the Industrial Policy Action Plan, as well as the relevant legislative regulatory requirements governing public incentive programs. The film and TV incentive is one of the practical policy instruments that helps to operationalize the creative cultural industry master plan strategic goals, especially for the film and television subsector. While the master plan sets out broad strategic direction, the incentive offers concrete financial mechanisms to realize those objectives in real production activity, skills development, and economic impact. In responding to the current crisis affecting the film and television production incentive, we remain mindful of government's broader objectives of job creation, localization, transformation, and inclusive economic growth. As highlighted in the memorandum, the incentive has been a cornerstone mechanism for investment and employment in the sector since 2004. And its stability is essential to restoring investor confidence and protecting jobs. Any interventions must therefore balance stakeholder concerns with the policy imperatives, while ensuring sound governance, transparency, and fiscal sustainability. The sheer quantum of funding required suggests that the sector may not be able to grow or sustain jobs without continued government support, which is an important concern for us as government as well. While the sector's contribution to investment and employment is recognized, there is a need to prioritize the development of a sustainability strategy. Once the sector becomes demonstrably profitable and globally competitive, market failures will be reduced or eliminated, creating scope for the gradual withdrawal of government incentives. The incentive design must therefore incorporate clear end goals and metrics to assess effectiveness. Now, we have a set of proposed actions, honorable members. And these look like raise and secure urgent interim funding to address the current claims and applications, while introducing measures to disperse any additional funding which may be received. In this regard, we are trying to find ways to reprioritize our allocation, and there are ongoing engagements with National Treasury to increase the allocation going forward. The second one is a national industry working group with key stakeholders, both private and public, to address the industry challenges. The third is to consider other types of incentive structures for the film industry that will address sustainability, such as tax incentives for foreign productions. The fourth one is to collaborate with the ITC and the NEF for blended financing options for local productions. The fifth one is to implement an automated system to reduce processing time and improve effectiveness, moving from manual to online portal to reduce administrative burdens. The sixth one is to provide additional human resource in order to cope with the influx of applications and claims. The seventh one is for provinces such as the Western Cape to be encouraged to offer incentives to reduce the burden on the national fiscus. The eighth one is a much more long-term outlook for the program to be transferred to the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, which will be administered by its agency, which is the National Film and Video Foundation, as the institution has sectoral expertise with the relevant DTIC officials seconded to manage the transfer of the future support program. The move will also be in line with other international jurisdictions that offer film incentives. Now, Honorable Chairperson and members of the committee, the department fully recognizes and values the critical oversight role of this portfolio committee, particularly in relation to the serious matters raised in the memorandum submitted by the Save SA Film Jobs Coalition. The memorandum highlights significant concerns regarding governance, administrative delays, and the impact of instability in the film and television production incentive on jobs, investment, and the sustainability of the sector. In this context, the committee's oversight is essential in ensuring that the incentive program remains transparent, credible, and aligned with national economic and industrial policy objectives. The department will therefore continue to keep the committee informed of progress on the issues raised, including steps taken to address the backlog, improve governance systems, and restore investor confidence. Furthermore, where the resolution of these challenges requires policy adjustments or legislative amendments, including mechanisms to strengthen accountability, transformation outcomes, or funding structures, these will be processed through the appropriate parliamentary channels in line with government procedures. In conclusion, Chair, the department welcomes the committee's guidance and partnership as we work to stabilize this important sector and respond responsibly to the demands placed before us. And before I conclude, I would like to applaud the administrators in working tirelessly with limited budgets, manual systems, and human resource constraints. The department reiterates its commitment to constructive engagement and social dialogue with industry stakeholders, including those who submitted the memorandum. We remain committed to evidence-based policy development that supports job creation, sector stability, and sustainable industrial growth. We therefore thank the Portfolio Committee for this opportunity to present, and we remain available to provide further clarity and respond to questions. I thank you very much, Chairperson and honorable members. And the Director General will lead the team in tabling the technical presentation that was submitted to the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. I will now hand over to the DG because we're trying to look at the time, there's a parliamentary session. I don't want us to deprive the industry an opportunity to engage as well as the portfolio committee. If you could just try, because we probably all have read the history and this and that, on the key things that have been raised as a challenge, and we will share the presentation with the industry as well, so that we can save time and have more time engaging, because we've got quite a number of questions. Over to you, DG.
Honorable Chair, members of the committee, Minister, Deputy Ministers, and leaders of the film industry, thank you for the opportunity. Mindful of your articulation, Chair, in terms of time and giving the industry time to present as well, I will go through this presentation fairly briskly, especially because the Deputy Minister has covered the bulk of the issues that are therein and explained them quite adeptly. This is the scope of our presentation. As indicated, this was launched in 2024 and several revisions were made, 2004, sorry, and several revisions were made, which I will speak to when I go through the slide that takes us through the various years. The overall purpose of this was to boost local and international productions in South Africa and to foster wider industry participation and transformation. And we had three categories which deal with Black filmmakers, foreign filmmakers, and South African filmmakers in general. The incentive scheme aims to improve South Africa's creative and technical skills base, especially among Black people, women, and youth, as well as to leverage the country's diverse locations and pool skilled technicians to attract more international filmmakers and develop the local industry. Chair, suffice to say that this scheme was a co-created scheme based on the department's understanding of the sector, its value to the economy in terms of not just skills, in the sense that it uses skills from the lowest and least skilled employees, but to the most advanced and qualified producers and filmmakers in this regard. The department also recognized the cross-sectoral impacts that this scheme has. Everything from clothing and textiles in terms of the attire that is worn by the actors, to hotels, to transport, to catering. You mentioned the impact. It is well understood. And I think we are in agreement with the sector in that regard in terms of our analysis and the return on investment that is associated with the sector. So I think the starting point should be that understanding that the department values the sector like it values many others, has worked with the sector over the years quite constructively. And in fact, the incentive scheme is acknowledged globally as being amongst the best in the world. And I think what we are sitting with at the moment are the successes of the scheme draining and weighing down on government's ability to continue to support the scheme at the level that the industry requires that support. And I think if we start from that point of view, we will find each other much quicker than if we start with a different outlook. Chair, to go to the next slide, 2004, the program was conceived and launched. We introduced a milestone payment system to afford filmmakers a degree of cash flow in their work so that they don't spend the money and only claim at the end. So we allowed for cash flow, milestone-based payments so that there could be cash flow in the system. In 2012, a post-production element was brought in, and the purpose there was to capture the remainder of the value chain associated with this sector, particularly the downstream in terms of the editing and everything that happens after the production has been shot. In 2014, the Emerging Black Filmmakers Incentive was brought in to commence the process of enabling transformation in the sector. And in 2018, the playing field was leveled to the extent that both Black filmmakers and all others, for the first time, got the same level of support. Previously, it was 25 million for the black filmmakers and 50 for the foreign ones. And in 2018, it was increased for the black filmmakers and Empower at 50 million across. And that on its own adds a financial burden on an already constrained fiscal and departmental allocation. In 2023, the key transformative requirement that was added was that all filmmakers, particularly the foreign ones, would then be expected to source at least 20% of the work that they are doing and the supplies that they require from 51% black-owned companies. And I don't think it is imperative that any of us would differ with, considering the need for continued transformation in all sectors. And in 2026, we are now looking at how to evolve this going forward and move it from being just a simple cash grant-based system, infusing all the elements that the Deputy Minister has spoken to in this regard. But this is the history of this incentive. I think the sector is fairly familiar with the criteria for eligibility, and those are stated in the regulations and policy of the department's incentive scheme, standard operating procedures. Now, this incentive scheme has been oversubscribed since 2021. But I think what we must say to the committee is that this crunch is not unique to this scheme. The complete portfolio of incentives that the DTIC administers has faced severe downward pressures from a fiscal allocation point of view. In 2020, 2021, there were payments that were made from the Films Fund, and those were mainly because of COVID, where the sector was not fully operational, and therefore there were a lot less claims that were coming through. Excuse me. Unfortunately, we do not have the means from a financial management point of view, as well as a PFMA point of view, to roll over funds, particularly uncommitted, and those that are based on an incentive. That is permitted in terms of procurement and SCM, but in terms of incentives, the instrument of rolling over funds, despite the fact that you may have a contingent liability, does not exist in terms of treasury regulations and how we manage the finances. And so all contingent liabilities become exactly that, unfunded, and we have to move money within the department to try and cater for them. And so in that year, the industry only submitted claims of up to 7 million rands, which is way below than what a single production would typically cost. And so those money had to be moved and used in incentive schemes that were performing at the time. In 2022, 2023, the incentive scheme or the incentive branch alone had to avail about 1.2 billion rands for the establishment and the funding of the Social Employment Fund. And this scheme only received the lowest cut, which was 68 million rands out of the 1.2 billion rand. Once again, indicating the department's commitment to keeping this essential incentive in place. Now, from that year, 2022, 2023 onwards, over and above this 1.2 billion rands reallocation and reprioritization, the department has had consistent haircut budget cuts at the rate of at least 1 billion rands a year, which means that there's 1 billion rands less in our funds annually to fund the incentives that we have. In 2023, 2024, the budget of the incentive scheme in terms of the allocation, if compared to the preceding year and the year thereafter, was reduced by about 136 million. That was a treasury allocation to that specific line. It was not a departmental discretion. Since 2024, 2025, we've had 0 approvals of new applications, and that is due to the recognition of the fact that the money that is available, budgeted and otherwise, has to be used to address the contingent liabilities so that we do not keep those who have already performed and spent the money in limbo. The financial incentive commitments approved in a given financial year going forward may be dispersed over the next 2 financial years in accordance with approved implementation schedule with the funds that are available. It is a fact that is a bit difficult to swallow, but is indicative of the state of the funding in this regard. This just gives an overview of some of the high-level funding allocations. And so what you will find is that based on funds available, 2020-21, 349 million in the budget, there was a reduction in the allocation of the incentive. We paid out based on claims valid and payable 122, and we approved 522 million rands of new applications. And effectively, this becomes part of your contingent liability. What this slide doesn't show, which is reflected in our annual financial statement, is that in this year already, we had a contingent liability of about 1.3 billion rands, which means that this 522 was adding to that when you go into the new financial year. And the contingent liability for the scheme has been sitting at above $1 billion plus, reaching up to 2 billion about 2 years ago, consistently over the years. This gives, though, the indication of the type of funding availability that the incentive scheme has had to work with, just this incentive alone. The committee would be aware of other sectors that are hard-pressed, including, amongst others, the global services sector, which deals with call centers. Exactly the same narrative, 2022, 2023, reallocations, budget cuts, consistent pressures in the budget of the department, and specifically the incentive scheme. This indicates the work that has been done to reduce the contingent liabilities over the years from about 2 billion rands to sitting to just under $500 million, as indicated by the DM earlier on. In the book right now, applications received, potentially executable, and if there was funding available, would have been approved. We are sitting with an additional liability of just over 1 billion rand, foregoing an investment of 9 billion rand because we are unable to fund these incentives. Some producers may proceed with their productions regardless of the department's inability to fund, but others may choose not to. I think DM articulated this slide quite well. The department has kept this fund, this incentive operational, regardless of the challenges, and we are looking at various solutions to sustain the industry beyond the once-off projects and be able to change how we are currently funding the industry going forward. Our indication is that before the end of this financial year, we may have to disperse an additional 116 million rands in favor of approved applications that are outstanding. I think, Chair, I will not speak to the governance processes, how this is managed. I think it's an established process. It has been vetted, audited, both by internal audit, PwC as external service providers, and AG repeatedly every year, because this almost always forms part of the scope of the AG audit on an annual basis. It's an established process that has worked quite successfully over the years. And I think, Chair, I would want to check, this gives an indication of the impact of the sector broadly. And what we are saying is that for every rand that we spend, the sector generates an additional 5 rands as a return on investment in this regard. The work that we have done, having supported in excess of 200 productions, saw 52% Black filmmakers benefit from this, 32% women filmmakers benefiting. The level of BE was between 1 and 4 in terms of the standing, and 32% of the local spend was procured from Black suppliers in this regard. In total, we have spent 2.1 billion. The local industry, the industry as a whole has spent 9.7 billion and created 16,794 jobs. Foreign filmmakers have benefited to the tune of 1.5 billion, invested 8.2 and created 11,498 jobs. And I think what is important here, Chair, is that when we say foreign filmmakers, we imply in terms of the regulations and the criteria that we have, that filmmaker has to have a local partner who is also empowered in their right. And so what you see that is not just someone who lands on the shores, applies and gets funding. They do so within the rules of the scheme that includes partnering with local filmmakers. South African films have received in their own right about 384, having spent just under $1 billion and created 1,859 jobs. And Black filmmakers have received 266 million rands, having spent 600 million and created inordinately more jobs at 3,437 jobs. And that was actually the basis of bringing the funding on par, realizing that local Black filmmakers created more jobs than filmmakers overall when we moved this from 25 million to 50 million so that it's on par across the various filmmakers. I think the risk is when submissions are made of claims that are ineligible because of the volume of work and the complexity of some of the processing. There may be overpayments, but there's a mechanism for dealing with how to recon that and recover some of the funds where some of these may happen. Being an incentive scheme, it is also open to attempts at all times to submit fictitious documents and wrong information. And so we have to consistently be on the guard to make sure that there's no leakage and pilferage in this regard. And then obviously the administrative burden and delays that are associated with a scheme that is not only underfunded, but would not always have all the necessary resources based on constraints within the department. We've been in communication with the industry at different times. I think the Deputy Minister spoke to the work that had been done in terms of the meetings with them. And as late as January this year, received the memorandum to which we have also responded, albeit slightly belatedly and with an apology due to the sector in this regard. DM has spoken to many of the initiatives to move the dial. I think the 8 that you have stated, DM, are more than sufficiently covered in this regard. At the end of the day, it is unlikely that the scheme will be able to continue simply as a cash-based grant on an ongoing basis, and that we have to find creative ways of helping the sector to grow, taking it that some of the market failures that we meant to address at the time would begin to have been mitigated by now. And there are many countries where without even an incentive, the film industry is growing. Now, that is not where we are going from a South African perspective, but we are saying we need to find each other in finding a balance and not add a drain to the fiscus in this regard. These are the individual demands that were contained in the memorandum that we've received. We did have a meeting on the day. Myself in absentia was led by the acting DDG Ngwenya, with the leadership of the Film Coalition. And we will continue to have different engagements with the sector. There is currently a proposal to create a work group that would begin to meet at least on a quarterly basis as part of not only conceptualizing how we review and evolve this incentive scheme, but improving the communication between the two. The second demand is the immediate resumption of the adjudication committee, which justifiably can only sit when there's funds to disperse. At this stage, as you can see, we have already done the assessment on the 80 projects that have applied. We know how much is required, but we cannot communicate outcomes of meetings that don't have the means to fulfill the decisions that would have been made by that meeting. Establishment of working groups, I think we are agreeing to this, and we will engage with the sector in that regard. Establishment of an online payment system for applicants to track applications and claims. This is an ongoing process based on a joint project that was mandated by DPME across all incentives in government, that there needs to be a single window of application, a portal that will look at ensuring that government has a view of all the incentives that it does work on. And the department will make efforts to create its own module of this National Incentives Management Scheme in the shortest possible time, given the resources that we have and not wanting to wait for too long for the national system to come through. So we're making efforts in collaboration with IDC to try and find funding to create this portal. Regular workshops, I think this is a necessary part of any interactions amongst partners and stakeholders so that we understand each other's concerns, but also understand the rules and the minimum requirements for participating within the skills, within the guidelines that are published. Priority application of approvals, applications that have already been submitted, including those for productions that have commenced, will only be considered, again, subject to availability of the budget, provided that they comply with the program requirements. Transparency in adjudication committees, noting, Chair, that no sooner than we avail information, either from a commercial sensitivity point of view or from a POPIA point of view, players of the same sector may end up litigating against the department. We are quite circumspect about the level of transparency that is provided, to the extent that the communication to the applicant is as transparent as it is, but to avail same to everyone in the sector when they themselves are inherently competitive in nature may not necessarily be optimal in this regard. But we do provide sufficient information in our annual reporting, and on the basis of applications for access to information where legally so permitted, we also provide that as already proven for the sector. Investigation into mismanagement at the DTIC. The minister will look into this at the earliest possible opportunity, I would say, without committing the minister soon enough. What would be assisting is for any information that supports such mismanagement be availed to the department, so that we not go on a wild goose chase and look everywhere in the department or with every employee within the incentives branch without knowing exactly what it is we are looking for. And I think that's one of the basic principles of many investigations, that it must be clear what you are investigating and trying to prove. Financial agencies, specifically IDC and NEF, to establish dedicated film fund. This is an effort that is already underway. In fact, NEF had previously collaborated with the Department of Culture and Sports and created a blended instrument that has been depleted once the department stopped the funding of that. NEF continued with non-financial support to some players in the sector that needed it. And we are talking to IDC to model a new funding instrument once we are able to fund it, to see how best to avail it to the sector. The reduction in red tape in terms of applications, approval, and disbursements, and speaking specifically to an online system, we will undertake to continue to work on this and establish what is required. But I think in terms of staffing, the branch itself, noting, Chair, that in public service, there was a moratorium on appointments for the longest of time. I think it was only lifted just under a year ago. And I can say that the department, as it reports to the committee even previously, has up to now, between the lifting of that moratorium and now, approved up to 4 batches of employees to be recruited into the department. And we are on a continuous recruitment drive to fill various posts in the department. Thank you, Chair. And I hand over back to Minister and yourself, Chair.
No, thank you very much. At least we try to save a bit of time. Can I then establish from the industry who's going to make the presentation within the space of 30 minutes, so that we have enough time to have a conversation? 40. Okay. Yeah, please, we have to be on time because there is parliamentary session and we can't keep members here. Yeah, if you can just move to the front there. Yes, over to you. If you can just maybe introduce the team so that Leo's here quickly, then you can proceed to the presentation.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. So Nakalibitsuki Wandile Mulawatsi, the Deputy Chairperson of the Independent Producers Organization. I'm here with Delon Baker, the Chairperson of the Independent Producer Organization. I'm joined by Luke Rouse, who is part of the IPO, Amilka Patel, who's the Chairwoman of the South African Screen Federation, Simon Makwela, who is the Chairperson of the South African Guild of Editors. I keep forgetting Adrian, who's here from the South African Guild of Actors. And we've got Jade Gezana, who is the Secretary General for the Independent Producer Organizations. Thank you, Chair. Before I start, I want to just thank the Honorable Chairperson and the Minister, and thank you for this opportunity. I am an actor turned filmmaker, and I've been in the industry for about 20 years. So this incentive has literally allowed me to pay for my children's school fees, has allowed me to buy a home, and I believe that the creative and cultural industries can be a solution for the youth unemployment challenge that we face in South Africa. But I want to thank you all so much for this opportunity. Honorable Chairperson, honorable members of the Portfolio Committee, thank you for the opportunity to address you today. We stand before you as the South African Save South African Film Coalition, a united body of guilds, organizations, producers, writers, actors, technicians, and service providers representing more than 15 major industry players in the South African film and TV industry. This includes the Independent Organization, the South African Guild of Actors, the South African Screen Federation, and the Writers Guild of South Africa, to name but a few. Today, we humbly stand before this committee and ask to please use all its power to restore a proven economic instrument to its legal and financial reliability. That this economic instrument returns to a thriving interest will return our sector to a thriving industry, to its former glory, to tell our stories and maintain our culture. We are a driver of youth employment, transformation, and robust economic growth. Film production is an incredible dynamic and agile industry, able to rapidly attract billions of rands in foreign investment and rapidly deploy this in all sectors of the economy. South Africa is one of the oldest film industries in the world, beginning in 1910. Its 100-year industry has cultivated world-class crews, incredible actors, and exquisite, diverse locations paired with very favorable weather like we're seeing today. We will show you now just some of the work that has come from our beautiful country.
You shouldn't have come here, but I'm glad that you did. I'm gonna show you something beautiful.
Yeah.
You can stay blind or you can open your eyes.
This is a case of murder and nothing less than murder.
Je ne fous pas, man. Like a guy plan, man, me for you.
Oh, what are you doing?
Some things are worth fighting for.
He's strong.
Are you with me? Watch this.
What's the price of freedom?
I don't know everything.
One of the films that were in that presentation is a film called Silverton Siege, which I produced That film was an ode to the Transvaal urban machinery, which my uncle was a part of, George Mulewat. And I jumping off the script because I wanted to highlight that film is more than just about the movies we create. It's about creating social cohesion and our ability to celebrate our culture. And that film for me was an incredible moment for me as a Black producer, where I could celebrate my uncle for what he had done for the country. This presentation will detail several concerning issues that brought the South African industry to its knees. This includes repudiations, incentive claims from 2002, red tape and anti-investment guidelines, and reporting numbers that are irregular. In 2004, government recognized the power of the induced film incentive, and it clearly made the DTIC goals. The purpose was clear: stimulate foreign investment, promote employment and skills development, drive export earnings, strengthen local supply chains, support measurable and accountable economic activity aligned with the TTI strategy. Over time, this has become very difficult. Today, we're here to dispel the notion and share the facts around what independent producers do and how we are pleading with the committee to help us revive our sector. What is important to note is that the incentive is not a grant. It's not a grant, colleagues. A grant is a discretionary paid upfront or a subsidy for creative work. The film incentive is a performance-based financial instrument, reimbursing between 20 and 40% of verified local expenditure, only after the production has been delivered and its measurable economic activity has been quantified. Government pays last. And if you're a Black producer, you have access to milestone funding, which is critical because unlike our other fellow South Africans, we don't have uncles that have got insurance companies and have got liquidity. And so the milestone structure is fundamental for us to close our financing. The incentive, the DTIC has blurred the lines over time, and production companies have lost so much effectiveness. The bureaucracy and the confusion about the guidelines has made it very difficult to close our financing. And we continue to engage the DTIC and ask them to work with us to solve these problems. The NFEF actually pursued a study, and they regularly release this information to the public. But the DTIC seem to keep this information away from us as a sector, and we're trying to understand why. Noting the failure of communication and transparency, we, as the Independent Producer Organization of South Africa, commissioned our own study. It was supported by multiple organizations that invested in the study, including the Gauteng Film Commission, the Industrial Development Organization of South Africa, and Netflix. The study was conducted by an international consultancy firm, Olsberg, which is a leader in film incentives. The report has not been released yet. We're hoping to release it during the Joburg Film Festival. I would like to add that we approached the DTIC to partner with the study and recognize the importance of the DTIC as a bridge for the incentive in our sector in general. Today, we should share some of those findings throughout the presentation. The findings, however, are a very stark difference to what the DTIC has understood. We will start with a snapshot of multiple studies that are included in the Olsberg report from 2024 and the NFEF report that was concluded in 2021. We use the acronym GVA, or Gross Value Added Return Investments. This means that every rand that the government invests in the incentive, we generate 5 rand, which we believe is incredible. Every rand the government puts into our film incentive, we generate 5 rand. It also shows that we're a key driver for employment and foreign direct investment. Over 85% that's spent on the incentive program is from FDI. I would like to draw your attention to the table that's at the bottom of the page, which highlights the research conducted by the NFEF. We can see, using different economic indicators, the results are very compelling. The film's industry's multiplier is almost double that of 2.82, compared to the average of 1.6. And again, almost double the number of jobs are created versus what the average South African industry can create. We're showing this so we can dispel the notion that we are not part of the solution. We are a strong economic driver across the world. And this, for me, is very important. Our ability to absorb youth employment is high. Semi-skilled labor is well documented in multiple studies around the world. Entrants will usually start off as runners, or in my case, will start off as actors. And as they work their way up, they move to higher paying positions as producers, as production designers, or as owners of companies. There are countless stories that demonstrate what the local industry can do. The slide on graph 9 shows the effect that the incentive can have. The numbers are significant, and the contribution to the local economy is undeniable. If you look at similar film economies, we use New Jersey on the right. The impact of the incentive rose from $80 million worth of investment in 2004 to $700 million worth of investment in less than 20 years. Now, to put that into perspective, the film economy that they had was smaller than ours, and it's larger than us today. And we use this case study for the case study of Raised by Wolves for a very specific reason. We wanted to show the ability of international productions to bring huge amounts of foreign direct investment. And there's a very important skills transfer element to when these opportunities arise. When you get producers getting to engage with production designers that deliver world-class Hollywood-level productions, there is skills transfer that happens on set in real time. This was shot in location in South Africa. The budget was 731 million in direct production spend, 1.2 billion in total production impact, 1,366 full-time equivalent jobs, 116 million in total taxes generated, which excludes withholding tax on foreign talent, which would definitely push this number much higher. The DTI rebate was 50 million. So in this case, government only had a foreign production. They had a foreign production that created jobs, injected millions into the local economy, but also netted at the very least 66 million rand in income. This incentive works. This case study shows that PAY taxes alone, not VAT, not corporate tax, not induced direct taxes. The incentive not only paid for itself through tax, but also did this 3 times over. A 25 million rand incentive attracted 661 million in foreign direct investment and generated 61 million in PAYE and over 100 million in direct and indirect induced tax. And this idea of screen and non-screen specific expenditure is very important. The screen specific category indicates that the percentage of production spend allocated to wages of below the line crew and to companies supplying goods and services such as equipment rental and special effects, wardrobe and set builders. The vendors included in this category do not participate in other sectors of the economy and do not contribute to the ripple effect. And this is the thing that we want to stress, that as a node of a creative activity, film intersects with performance, music, art direction, pouring petrol into vehicles. Film sets interact at all of these levels. The remaining expenditures included in the non-screen category. This is the portion of the budget spent on vendors and services from individuals and companies that supply a variety of sectors in addition to the screen production. Within the ripple analysis, This spend is designated to associated business sectors. Between 55 and 75% of a production's below the line expenditure will typically occur in these non-screen specific sectors. This means, for example, that if television series has a total below the line budget of 20 million, between 11 million and 15 million of that spend will likely be spent on non-screen specific sectors. That's food, that's clothing, that's petrol. All these things are non-screen specific expenditures, but contribute to our economy. To illustrate amplifying these percentages, our case study that you see at 731 million in production expenditure will bring 475 million to the sectors outside of screen production. These funds propped up other activities in the economy. Now, it's important to say that this is not an opinion. This is fact. And effectively, the film sector has become a form of smart manufacturing. We have a very low environmental impact, but effectively we manufacture products that then get sold around the world. Since 2015, the foreign incentive has generated 26.4 billion in gross GVA ROI across the Southern economy. And this could definitely be higher. The film sector functions as a smart manufacturing sector, producing exportable audiovisual content for local and international markets. Like the automotive sector, it activates extensive value chains and SMME networks across technical services, logistics, manufacturing, and professional support. Both sectors absorb skilled, semi-skilled, and entry-level labor, while enabling ongoing skills transfer and skills capacity building. Large projects generate significant downstream spending in transport, accommodation, security, creating regional economic multipliers. Each industry attracts foreign investment and international partnerships, and our local filmmakers benefit from this. Let me be clear. There's no place in the world that has the perfect conditions for filming like we do. We have incredible crews. We have the most amazing actors. We have the most incredible locations, and it's all at low production point. And we're blessed with incredible locations like the Blythe River Canyon in Mpumalanga, or that featured in Mission Impossible, or the beautiful Drakensberg in KZN, and the pristine beaches that we have here in KZN, in Cape Town. When you add all of this together, and the strong reality about Black professionals and Black talent, you have a beautiful recipe for growth. And this recipe can only be sustained through government support. Strong growth, strong foreign direct investment, and the industry can explode. We actually often talk as crew that the power of our sector is allowing us to raise our hands as a sector and say, look, we want to be part of the solution to the youth unemployment challenge. We can absorb huge amounts of youth unemployment. And we, as a sector, literally become little TVET colleges moving around the country. Because on set, you get to experience technical skills, you get to interact with human beings, and you get to earn a living wage that is much better than agriculture. Much better than agriculture. And even though it's seasonal, the nature of the film sector, there is a referral in our community. And so people are always able to move from the wife to Inamba, from Inamba to Mpepe, for example. And that referral of the economy is what keeps people working. We have limited time. It's important to show that foreign industries actually prop up our local sector. A big budget international film can be north of $50 million to $100 million. But these films allowed for increased employment, which is very important in terms of skills transfer, as I mentioned earlier. And it makes us the best filmmakers in the world. These skills start to prepare the next generation of generation of filmmakers to tell our important stories. We just wanted to show you this clip. Oh, so this clip is from an actor called Tom Cruise, and was talking about the experience he had on a South African set. And we'll all laugh because he says Ubuntu in a funny way. But I think what he's saying about our country is what we are taking away as filmmakers. Effectively, he's saying that he came and shot film.
That humanity is based on the plural, not the singular. And it is the idea that humanity is based on the plural, not the singular. And Ubuntu means essentially, I am, because we are. And so I thank all of you. And I am, because you are. Thank you.
Now, whilst I'm sure the committee has a lot of numbers and we can never underestimate the power of the economy, the soft power of the film sector cannot be quantified. It's about what it does for tourism. And that's why we believe that our films, having Nomzamo walking on a beach, will attract someone who lives in Atlanta to come and visit our country. When you have a young, cool Michael B. Jordan skateboarding in Johannesburg, young African Americans are going to be like, oh, so Africa ain't just about animals. There's a city there. Let's go visit it. And that's the power of what we do as filmmakers. In 2018, the industry and the department recognized that we needed to accelerate transformation. And the industry responded, and we're happy to comply. The sector quickly moved to transform, and by 2021, you will see in the graph that 75% of the companies were either level 1 or level 2. And many of these companies like Seriti, like Salamina, these are female-owned businesses. It's not just about Black men. There are Black women that are steering and leading these productions, like Posha Kumete at Oka. The list goes on. I'd like to hand over to my chair to carry on. Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, DC. This is going to be interesting. I have to drive and talk at the same time. Can men multitask? This is the big question. Yeah, if you can. Thank you, committee members, for giving us this opportunity today. I think we're all very excited to be here today. I'll be picking up from where DC was talking. But then everything changed. We had this great film industry for 20 years, and then things started to change. Obviously earlier, the departments explained the film incentive process here. And as you can see, you apply for a provisional approval, and the provisional approval is very important because that acts as your bankable guarantee, and it's something that I'll come back to a little bit later. Traditionally, the process of engaging the film incentive was predictable. Projects made an application, and the meeting required eligibility criteria to be met. Provisional approvals, which were enabled and presented, gave producers the ability to bank them. Projects were produced in South Africa, injecting the FDI and job creation potential. And then a full report and claim was presented to the DTIC. It's very important to note that back then, you needed a provisional approval to move into production. You use that as a bankable guarantee to cash flow that part of the finance plan. Next slide, please. Then, however, in 2020, this was completely shattered when the DTIC repudiated 25 projects with incentive claims valued at 535 million, citing the productions had become non-compliant according to their new guidelines. This was completely unprecedented. Investors had deployed hundreds of millions of rands into the South African economy, with a core pillar of their venture being the revenue from their approved incentives. Millions in taxes, income, and economic stimulation had been released with the expectation of their trust being rewarded. But the DTIC damaged that trust by clinging to red tape. Producers fought to get the repudiations overturned with the threat of legal action and protest. The industry prevailed upon Minister Patel, the then Minister of the DTIC. To our knowledge, all the repudiations were overturned without a single case of non-compliance being confirmed. It was all unfounded. But despite getting these incentives paid out, the payments did little to repair the damage that had been done to the incentive program worldwide. The damage was done. The incentive showed its officials could arbitrarily revoke a provisional approval which acted as a bank guarantee and go rogue without being held accountable. Film studios, banks, and financiers became hesitant to lend or engage the film incentive. And a substantial amount of producers and production companies started to turn their back on South Africa. And what we saw is not only a decrease in FDI, but we started to see a decrease in films. If you look at the slide over here, we're on slide 30, that's a little bit too far, but if we go to slide 28 here, our incentive is plagued by complicated and uncertain processes and over-complex guidelines, and severe delays because of irregular meetings and an understaffed team. We also believe that the DTIC, because of their lack of collaboration with us over the years, don't understand the movie business. And this is sad because the industry has always tried to engage them and find that common ground. And it's sad that we're here today because we've tried so many times to follow lines of diplomacy. The IDC model they spoke about in their presentation is the first time we're hearing of it. I mean, again, another initiative being driven without consultation with industry. There is so much information we can give them to help develop the best incentive program available, and we wish that they would engage us more often. Slide 29. We see the impacts over the last, slide 29, just one back. We see the impacts of the last few years with 2 service companies alone. 29. We see the impacts over the last few years with 2 service companies alone reporting over 3.3 billion in lost work to competing countries. One of the things that DTIC mentioned earlier is that the scheme was too good. It was too successful. It was too good at creating jobs and bringing investment. I mean, let that sink in for a moment. So we can move to slide 30, please. When we compare ourselves to other incentive programs, when we compare ourselves to our competitors, we see that their guidelines are predictable, they're short timelines, easily turn around, completely transparent. The guidelines are understandable. I mean, there you can see claims are done in the UK in between 6 and 8 weeks. In South Africa, it can take a year, 2 years. And then you've seen this downward trend that I was speaking about earlier, with less capital available and fewer professionals available to sustain themselves in film. Fewer and fewer local films are able to be made. Local films rely on film incentives for substantial portions of their budgets, given the incentive makes up a larger portion of their budget. What we see is foreign films pay for local films by the extra money that they bring into the fiscus, and that there is a correlation between the declines there. And this production decline and dysfunction in the film incentive is a mark against South Africa as a whole. You see, major studios investors use the film incentive of different countries as an indicator of the reliability that a country's general framework works. A failing incentive signals to them that key institutions must suffer the same fate. Yes, it's about the money, but it's also about understanding that when they move into a market, will the rules be followed and processes be followed? Now, this might be unfair to us, and it might be unfair for people around the world, but this is what they use as a litmus test. It is of the utmost importance we turn the reputation of the film sector around, not just for us, but for South Africa as a whole, because we must never underestimate the power of international film and Hollywood to showcase the great country that we are. Unfortunately, my sympathies out to the DG and the minister, because I know this came late, but these are just some of the correspondence we have tried over the years to engage the department of. Multiple organizations have tried to deal with diplomacy and find each other, but we have been ignored. This led us to industry action that we had to unfortunately take at the beginning of last year. We called it a picket because we wanted to be non-adversarial, but we wanted to shine a little light on the matter. And unfortunately, the things that were promised to us were never delivered on. And then in 2026, most recently, the industry was at its knees. I remember specifically speaking to a casting director who told me that she had a conversation with an actor who was, considering suicide because he just didn't have any work. And then eventually we got a response from the department, and obviously they had gone through that earlier. In 2023, new guidelines were released. Despite calls for simpler, more investor-friendly guidelines, the DTIC in 2023 implemented a new set of guidelines completely without industry input. These guidelines came upon us. We never had any chance to engage, offer our professional expertise. What happened here is there were further restrictions placed on production activity. Later on, I'll bring you to the reports, and you'll see that at that time, there was a substantial liability in the annual reports, which begs the question, were these initiatives put to hamper productions as a way of decreasing that liability? We need to ask that question. Moving on to slide 38, here's an example of bureaucracy. So, Mellow Shark, the DTIC overly bureaucratic approach to administrating the film incentive is seen clearly in the case of the court ruling in favor of the production company Mellow Shark. Mellow Shark took the DTIC to court after it cancelled a 3 million incentive over non-compliance and they were in their rights to cancel the previously approved amount. This case dragged on for several years, eventually being put out before a high court judge who in 2022 ruled against the DTIC. The DTIC was ordered to pay the full incentive amount to Mellow Shark with interest, as well as its bond fees and a legal cost. But to this day, Mellow Shark still has not been paid, and it exists on the DTIC liabilities, despite a court order instructing them to do so. I know that has gone through 2 processes now. You will note that in the judgment of this case, they referred to this as an Alice in Wonderland case, where the DTIC's rebate office being the bureaucracy of Wonderland and the applicant being Alice, just getting completely lost in it. After failed attempts and appeals, the DTIC continues to defend this using taxpayers' money after a scathing judgment. Slide 40. This slide shows the victimization producers have faced by the DTIC officials. Now, we do not want to paint all the DTIC officials with the same brush. There are good people there, and we have worked with them. But as you'll see in this email correspondence, there are problematic individuals there who use the guidelines as they deem fit. This is an email from DTIC officials to one another regarding a young female Black-owned production company. It shows the artificial barriers they were putting up to cancel claims. According to our knowledge to date, these officials still work within the DTIC. So if I just read this part here, dear DTIC official 2, in light of the volumes and pressure the team is working under in our EXCO discussions, kindly prepare me a letter of notice of intention of cancellations of this claim. Should your office struggle to get all requisite compliance documentation, and make sure the compliance documents are too tough to get, including fresh letters of funding commitments, which I do not think she can provide. I think that speaks for itself, and I will move on to the next slide. Here is just a survey that we ran here, talking about what the industry is feeling towards the DTIC rebate office. Some of the stats there are quite compelling. There's overwhelming discontent with the office from the industry. At the bottom there, you will note, have you experienced intimidation from the DTIC? 25% of respondents said that they have. Again, 14,000 signatories from the industry asking for the reform of the incentive. SASFED launched a PI request for certain documentation to be delivered. We received this documentation. As you can see in front of us here, and we'll be comparing this to the annual reports as we move towards the end of our presentation. If you look here, you'll be able to see that they have broken it down between approved, cancelled, fully paid, partially paid, and cancelled. So the above diagram is the PI request, and at the bottom is the summary of the DTIC annual reports. Now, what's problematic is there's different wording used everywhere to describe things, which makes it difficult for us to track it. But we've tried to do this to our best of our abilities. What you'll see in financial years of 2019 and 2020, you will see the liabilities incurred, which they talk about the success of the scheme, were at 1 billion and 1.2 billion. Now, when looking at the PFMA and PASA, it's important that the department makes sufficient budget to meet those liabilities. But you'll be able to see that in the 2020-2021 financial year, the budgets actually decreased to 141 and 354. We know from the department's presentation that monies went off to the Social Employment Fund. But when you have those liabilities, you have to be able to meet them because you've incurred them. The second thing here is we'll look at just the success when you compare the PI application and the annual reports, you'll be able to see massive differentials between what those numbers come to. So, we've struggled to line them up. And even on the presentation that they showed earlier, we looked at it and we couldn't make sense of those numbers either. I'll bring you to the bottom here. In the 2024 financial year, there's a 639% variance between what was given to us in our PI request, which was given to us last year, and what's reflected in the annual reports. And I think there needs to be a look into how these numbers are built and why there's such a substantial variance. And at the bottom here, around the reports, we have in the last financial year, when there were no adjudication committees, the incentive somehow incurred 29 million rands. Now, if the incentive program is suspended, how are we incurring 29 million rands worth of liabilities? We know in our PI request that there was one production that was given an approval, but if the incentive system is suspended, how are they getting approval? So these ask a lot of questions. Conclusion and solutions. So, we come before the committee now and we humbly request the following. We request a resolution vote deeming the film and TV industry a critical economic sector. In 2 months' time, we ask that the committee bring us back and the minister and the department to report on progress in resolving this impasse. We also ask for the Portfolio Committee to write to the Public Protector to request an investigation into repudiations of 2020 and the inconsistent financial reporting. And this brings us to the conclusion of our presentation. I hope we made it within the 40 minutes. I think we might have been a little bit up, but thank you very much for the time.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate that, and everything went on time. I think just before I allow members of the committee to ventilate their questions, Honorable Minister, I know this is not your own doing. There are like 25 correspondences not responded to. It's just unacceptable. From 2021 to this year, no response. Secondly, there are changes in the guideline that get gazetted, no consultation with the industry. Thirdly, there is just no research. It's like there is no intention to take care about what is happening, about information, some of the information that is coming from the industry, including the fact that they argue that they have been producing some research work which would have been helpful to try and restructure the sector. But because of being non-responsive, we've had challenges in this regard. I do think that the case, and I will share with yourselves so that the DG and the team can look into it. The case of repudiation of 2021, 2020, 2021 is a massive problem that occurred, which put us where we are today. And I do believe that we must work to try and uncover what happened. Why was this the issue? Because it's being raised quite sharply here. I will also share with you my notes that I've. So let's allow members to interact so that we can then see how we're able to move forward, because what the process of parliament should assist us to do is to bridge the impasse, because we represent the people of South Africa. So if there's an outcry that the department is not responsive here, we have an obligation to arrange a meeting like this without taking side, to say the department is wrong, the industry is right, but to say something abnormal has been happening. So in that way, we do need to find a solution. And probably finally, the Deputy Minister has made some recommendations, which I hope have been captured or will be shared with the industry, so that in our next round of engagement, whenever that is, once we found each other, at least we also get a response from the industry that here are the proposals on the table, because the role of Parliament is to create an enabling environment for us to discuss. Is not to force the department to do certain things, but if things are not done right, there's certain things we can do, but we cannot do that at the first meeting, because for me, the fact that we are now meeting like this today is groundbreaking. So let's hear each other, that there are proposals on the table, because at least the department is saying, we are proposing the following. The only thing, Minister, I am uncertain about is moving our responsibility to another department. I just think that we are really, it's a lazy approach, if you like. Say, no, this is a film sector, this must move somewhere. We are in charge of the entire value chain of the economy. And film sector, by statistics and the numbers that are shared with us, is a very important sector in terms of what we're pursuing, in terms of growth, in terms of jobs, and so on and so forth. we have to find ways in which we can say, how do we ensure that we can strengthen our initiative so that whatever the Film and Video Foundation is doing, Department of Art and Culture is doing, it must be a broader contribution, and we should be saying to them, how do we work with everybody to probably create a blended finance regime that is going to assist the industry, other than to say, no, these guys are matching a lot, let them go to the other department. I don't think we can accept that. This is a very important economic sector, which, and I must maybe declare, Minister, that personally I also did work in the sector. Honorable Deputy Minister will know. I was a CEO of Gauteng Film Commission, so I know a lot about the plight of the sector. I just need to, so that next time you don't go on Google and say, oh, this chap, why does he know so much about the film sector? I've worked in the sector and we've tried quite a number of things. And I really think that even at the time when the regime of the incentive were introduced, I know that it would have been before your time, there was strategic intent on how we're going to support this particular sector. But something somewhere in the administration went wrong. And unfortunately, Minister, you're a politician, we have to blame you. But that's why I fully support this recommendation that there has to be a probe on that repudiation, because even in your presentation, you don't talk about the case that you lost and its implication, because you know what the industry is claiming is that actually after the loss of that case, the people who didn't participate in whatever form in that case, they were the ones who were called by some of your TDGs and say, you guys are good guys, let's pay you. That's why that 450 million became a problem for you. Now you have a contingency liability you cannot explain, because it's clear, the PFMA is clear that you cannot approve a budget that is not there. But all these things started in 2021. So we'll share some of the notes so that, because the interest of Parliament is to find solution, is not to grandstand, you are right, you are wrong, is to say, how do we then find each other? And finally, I think there are some developments, having followed the kind of good work that you are doing as our minister, that I believe that the launch of the Transformation Fund should not be devoid of initiative like this that are evident that they carry the unskilled, semi-skilled professionals, even international investors. So when we think about how do we put together these packages, we need to think about the role of sectors like this on how we can position them, including where we're in control. If in the lotteries money we need 500 million or a billion, I don't think that should be a problem, but it requires your leadership to be decisive, to say, look, other than building these sports facilities that have created a crisis for us, every day you have to listen to the SIU, the Hawks and everything, and what happened there. It's something that is far removed from us. We've got to find ways in which we can refine certain things that it works in our favor. So I'm using these remarks because I accepted the memorandum here in Parliament with my colleagues, Honorable Chance and Honorable Mdlul, and we saw respect and discipline from the sector. And then we had a meeting to try and understand what are the issues. And they told us, no, let's meet quickly, but we are going to Pretoria too much. They also came to your office. So it is in that spirit that I don't want the committee members or ourselves who must continue, this infighting thing when we must be looking for solution. I will now allow the members to engage with the presentation. Honorable Mdluli, Honorable Chance, Honorable Webster, Honorable Tring, Honorable Musikasi, Honorable Koza, and Honorable Langa, and Honorable Kikapa. Yes, thank you, in that order.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for that presentation. It was very enlightening and very insightful. We really do appreciate your efforts. I'm not going to be long. I'll just go straight into my questions. The first one is, I'm referring to the department's presentation. So it says that, for example, like when it comes to the budget side of things, it says that the program has been oversubscribed since 2021, yet funds were vied away and budget cut
How does the department justify reallocating resources away from a high demand program while claiming it has strong economic impact? The second one is in 2022-2023, 1.2 billion was shifted to the Social Employment Fund. What cost benefit comparison was done to justify this reallocation relative to expected returns from film incentives? The second group of question is the beneficiary list that has been provided by the department shows large disbursements to established production houses. What share of funding is concentrated among the top 10 recipients? The second one is if foreign studios prefer established partners, how does the incentive avoid reinforcing market concentration rather than expanding participation? And I'll now be moving on to another group. So the department proposes the shifting of the program management to another entity. I do agree with the chair that I don't think is the right approach. In that light, is this an admission of capability gaps within the DTRC? The second question is what governance and accountability structure would apply if the responsibility shifts? And the third one on that is why is there fragmentation between DTIC, IDC, NEF, DSAC, and provinces rather than a unified national strategy? So the presentation also notes Nigeria and Kenya grow their strategies without incentives. What lessons were extracted from those models? The second one is if incentives are not sustainable fiscally, why maintain the current model rather than redesign it now? So and then the guys in the film industry are demanding investigation into mismanagement. The response was that motivation was insufficient. Therefore, what proactive internal reviews were undertaken regardless? And secondly, what metrics does the department use to evaluate stakeholder trust and industry confidence? The last batch of questions are with regards to a future reform proposal. What specific timeline exists for a blended finance design, working group outputs, tax incentive reviews, and portal implementation? And what measurable outcomes will determine whether reform is successful? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Number two.
Thank you very much, Chair. And just apologies in advance. I have to leave at 1 o'clock to attend to another engagement. But first of all, I just want to thank Minister Tau and your team for coming today, and also the industry, and also you, Chairperson, for responding so promptly to the request for this meeting, because we did receive the petition on the 28th. After that meeting, I think we made a commitment, and and just a few days later, we got notice of this meeting. So I think that is an indication of Parliament doing its job. It's just unfortunate that it's taken so many years to get to this point. I think my first comment is that it's clear that this industry is not a bunch of creatives with no concept of, economic value. They are obviously a very sophisticated group of people that understands their industry intimately, not just the value that it creates in terms of projecting South Africa to the world, but also more generally as an economic sector that is extremely important to job creation in the areas where it operates, mostly in Gauteng, the Western Cape, and KZN. And purely on the numbers, it just seems odd to me that the government generally, and I'm talking about not just the DTIC, but Treasury and others, don't see the fundamental return that it gets, that the state gets on its investment. If we look at the gross value added of 26 billion, a substantial portion of that ends up back in the state coffers because of the way in which the tax system works. And so I think what is first required, Minister, is that there needs to be a comprehensive econometric analysis, a cost benefit of this project, this program, compared to other incentive programs. And as the industry pointed out, Ms. Wandile pointed out, this is not a grant, it's a stimulus. And then what is the stimulus comparison between this and other projects and other programs? My colleague on my left asked the question about the jobs fund, the social employment fund. What is the return on investment of that? And the agreement, did that actually produce the results that the department expected of it? I think the other point that needs raising is that it shows a fundamental difference of opinion between the industry and the government, your department, as to what is the purpose of an incentive scheme and how does this compare with other incentive schemes around the world. And clearly what we've seen is that this industry depends upon incentive schemes in every country in which it operates, with the exception of a few, where, for example, in Nigeria and India and the United States, you have the massive demand, the local demand that is able to create that industry. In this country, we have a problem even with the SABC. We don't have local commissioning of work that is able to sustain the industry. So the local market is not big enough to actually provide that base load, if I can call it that, to sustain the industry. That is why we need incentives. That is why countries like Iceland, Jersey, Malta, who are fractions of our size in terms of their GDP, have these incentive schemes because they see the value that they create for their economies. So I think that it requires a different approach, a different mindset from the department. And this can only really be achieved by having a proper dialogue. And clearly what we've seen is that there's just like a brick wall that exists between you and them. And an us and them relationship cannot exist in a healthy environment. The other thing is we've heard a lot about maladministration, but I also detect an element of malintent here in certain sections of your department. And I know you've inherited a lemon, Minister, in this film incentive program, and you're trying to, deal with the problems that you inherited. But the fact is that there are, I believe, and I've had discussions with the industry for some months now, certain individuals in this department, in your department, who didn't have the best interest of this industry at hand. And there seems to be a deliberate attempt by your officials to stymie applications. We've seen the letters, the emails, just a small example. And I've seen, frankly, shocking emails coming from members of your department referring to coolies and Jew boys. In other words, they don't want to issue money or grants to companies that they believe are ideologically or whatever, racially, distasteful. Now that may seem shocking, and it is shocking, but I think this is why the industry is calling for a full investigation as to what is really behind this thing, because it doesn't make sense. Why would you not spend money on an incentive program that has a 5-to-1 multiplier effect? Just doesn't make sense. So I think that there is a cause for a deeper investigation, and they have called for the public protector to investigate. And I definitely think that that is something that is worth pursuing. Again, just coming back to the multiplier, in a sense, your department, this government has an obsession with steel, cars, ferrochrome, all the things that we associate with an industrial nation. But the industrialization of South Africa also requires value-added services. And the point about this industry is that it doesn't require huge capital investment. The tying up of big amounts of capital to drive it. Being a service-based industry, it's very nimble. It is able to attract investment very quickly, literally, tomorrow. It doesn't require 10-year investment plans like a mine or a car factory. And this is why I think you're missing a trick here. So I think that the questions that my colleagues will be asking, and the questions that the industry has asked, and they've shared a lot of questions with us, many of which will probably have to be answered in written form, are calling for a root and branch investigation into why this industry has been neglected, and has been neglected to the detriment of hundreds of thousands of people in this country. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Number 3. No, still think Muskas, then you're number 4, you're number 5. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Chairperson. Let me also greet the minister in our midst, the DMs present and colleagues here, and the industry present here. Chairperson, let me just also ask 3 questions. From the presentation of the industry, the department indicated they will be developing a online system to actually cut the red tape. My question to the department is there any time frame attached for the development of the system so that we can be able to know? And it goes for also the demand in terms of staffing of office and capacity building. Also, there is no time frame attached as to when will this be done. And then to the industry, in terms of the investigation, I think we all agree that investigation needs to happen in a department to ensure that we clean up the department and things are being done in the right way. I just want to check with the department, maybe it's part of the letters that they have been indicated writing to the department. Have they ever opened a case at the police station for any mismanagement, or the letters that you wrote to the department, is it part of those that indicate the mismanagement in the Department of Funds? Thank you, Chairperson.
Yes, number 4. Ms. Webster. Mr. Tring will be number 5.
It changed again. Thank you so much, Chair. Good morning to the Minister, DMs, DTIC, and to the industry and my fellow colleagues from the Portfolio Committee. I too must give a disclaimer in my knowledge of the industry. I have worked in this industry, owned businesses in the industry. And so I've engaged with some of these issues on the other side of the fence. But I think I want to first mention something that's really, really important. There's a number of issues when it comes to this industry, and we're dealing with the specific memorandum and specific issues today, this morning, but there are issues in the industry which I believe we have to put on the agenda going forward. And that this should be the start, Chair, of further engagements and how we make the industry sustainable, and how we make it part of the industrialization agenda in the country. I think it's been mentioned by previous colleagues and by the sector itself, really how the sector takes part in industry, the value chain, what the value chain is comprised of, the infrastructure, post-production facilities, there's logistics that's involved, there's actually IP ownership that's involved in the industry. And I think that the first comment that I want to make in direct response to the DM's introduction is that I think we have to caution against moving any incentive or any programs from the DTIC to sports, arts, and culture, because the arts aspect of the industry is but one component of a multi-sectoral kind of industry. And like I've mentioned, there's other aspects to it in the production of the ultimate product that you get in the industry. So I think that that's something that's really, really important. And we need to keep it within the DTIC. We have to, in fact, look at how do we make the incentive more sustainable. I do think we need to look at how departments work better together that are involved. The Department of Small Business Development, as an example, does not in any way engage meaningfully with the industry, whereas there's a whole lot of small businesses that are within this industry. So I think what we need to be looking at, rather than moving the incentive, is saying how do other departments that are involved with the industry work together in order to be able to help industrialize the industry further. The second that I want to speak about, which is a passing shot and isn't necessarily what today is about, but I want to speak about the fact that there's still more work to be done in transforming the industry, which is why it's important that it stays within the DTIC. The incentive does include Black filmmakers, but the practice of it means that there are advantages to large global and established service companies with balance sheets that make it easier to pre-finance productions for them. That's the first. The second, like I've said, is that there's a whole ecosystem. And while you might see a number of Black producers, there's still within the ecosystem other aspects of the value chain that actually still need to be transformed. So the DTIC has done incredible work when it comes to even establishing a particular Black film producers incentive, but there's more to be done within the value chain and making sure that it is transformed. I then want to get into some direct questions. I mean, we've engaged with the sector over previous months and even year before last, et cetera, in terms of what has been happening. And one of the issues that has been raised by the industry, and I do think that it's very possible that, as my colleague, Member Chan said, the minister, the deputy minister, there are issues, even the DG, that you may not be aware of. We've been advised that the department assured industry in 2021 that if funds were ring-fenced at approval stage, that funds were ring-fenced in 2021. So if those funds were ring-fenced, how then did the department later lack funds? And I think that's something that has to be looked into, DG, in terms of the ring-fenced amounts that were there and the annual budget allocations. The second is that there's been consistent, and there were consistent allegations that actually came from the DTIC themselves of fraud and fronting, and it was the reason why at times funds were withheld. And there was a ministerial task team that was to investigate that was committed to by the minister. I think it's important to look back and see what happened to the task team, what were the findings that happened with that particular issue, and furthermore, even in the same period, there was a commitment to a red tape reduction unit that should have been established to make sure that it makes it easier for the industry to engage with the various incentives that exist and the various programs that exist. I think it's important to also ask the question, and maybe we're able to get the answers even today, in terms of, was that red tape reduction unit actually established? What has it accomplished in making it easier for the industry to be able to engage and access the funding and programs that have existed? I then, on the Deputy Minister's commitments, would like to ask some just direct questions with regards to today and the outcomes that we get out of today. There has been a commitment to sourcing alternative budgets or alternative sources of funding for budget. Will the adjudication resume only once that additional budget is sourced, or will adjudication continue? Will applications continue? And if that's the case, doesn't that then mean that you're escalating the contingent liability that already exists? I think if we can get that clarity at DM with regards to the budget that you are proposing be sourced. And then lastly, in terms of additional resources for the film unit, when will they be deployed? Is funding for these posts secured? What is the process, and what is the kind of timing and timeframes that we can look out for and that we can agree on today when it comes to that? Thank you.
Member Trin.
Thank you, Chair. Unlike my colleague, other colleague, and yourself, Chair, I do not have any disclaimer. So I sit here as a neutral arbiter in a sense. But let me also just thank the industry as well as the department, the minister, deputy minister for DG for their inputs. Chair, I agree. I think despite some of the questions that I'm going to ask, I agree with you that what certainly needs to happen is that the department and the industry needs to sit together in a room. The lack of communication, the non-response in terms of communication is not acceptable. I think, common courtesy would be to respond to emails that you receive. And so I think that the department and the industry certainly needs to sit in the room, because we cannot allow for this particular industry to fail. Then maybe just coming to my questions, mainly to the department, Minister DMs. In the department's presentation, DM indicated that there's millions still outstanding that are owed rather to projects. New projects exceed DTIC budget allocations, which is concerning, and that there are no additional funds to support all of the projects. Now, we've had environments from 2020 to 2021. We've had 1.2 billion shifted, as previously mentioned by my other colleagues, in 2022, 2023. We've had a reduced budget of 136 million in 2023, 2024. Now, clearly, when one just looks at just those 3 years, from 2020 to 2024, it's a clear downward trajectory in terms of finances and budgets available. So my first question is, what was done by the department, noting this reduced budget that is becoming available? What was done by the department to actually close the gaps? Because some alarm bell should actually start ringing, that we have a problem here in terms of reduced finance that is available. Because in my opinion, all of these shifting and environments and reductions should have been the alarm bell that says this is going to bring the industry to its knees and we need to intervene before it happens. So in those particular years, what has really been done in terms of alerting the industry that this is where the department finds itself? So DG also suggested that we find creative ways, and I agree with that. I think the Deputy Minister also spoke about solutions to the current impasse. Speaking to Treasury, some tax incentives, working with IDC, NEF, looking at provinces providing incentives. I think great ideas, obviously, except the transfer of this to arts and culture. But my question here is, of these solutions that have been recommended, which have been prioritized as the ones that can be implemented in terms of finding a solution to the challenges that the industry faces? So which are the ones that have been prioritized? Because I think there were about 9 or so DM that you listed. Then the film industry proposed work groups in their document. They made the suggestion of work groups to provide solutions to the new DTIC guidelines and what they also termed as DTIC disruption. So it appears that the DTIC has not engaged with the film industry on these work groups. DG, I think you may have covered that. I think you may have in your response. I know that you referred to work groups, but can you just then maybe unpack if you actually have taken up the suggestion of this being a solution to some of the challenges and what they call the disruption in the industry? Then I want to know also the Mellow Shark, the presentation on Mellow Shark was what is owed to Mellow Shark included in your contingent liabilities, and has the department now complied with the court's ruling on Mellow Shark, and if not, why not? And then lastly, or penultimately, how does the department respond to the allegations of having an understaffed film unit, and a unit that is strained by the volume of applications which they seem not to be able to deal with? And then, Minister, perhaps if you could indicate your response to the financial challenges with regards to variance in the 23-24 year, as well as the 29 million liability incurred in 24-25, when the incentives have apparently been suspended. including a call for an NPA investigation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Member Langa.
No, thank you very much, Chair. And greetings to the department led by the Minister, the film industry or the film sector representatives, portfolio committee colleagues, and everyone within the four walls of the Good Hope Chambers. Chair, let me also join my colleagues in welcoming the presentation by the DG of the department, and also the presentation by the film sector through, I think it's the chairperson and the deputy chairperson. I couldn't quite capture the names. I must say, the film sector presentation was very enlightening and touching and moving at the same time. And somehow, you know, when you sit on the other side, because this is like a department, or rather a sector, that maybe every South African is exposed to. You know, when one gets disturbed when you see it facing such challenges. And it's definitely one sector that we have to try and ensure, excuse me, that it is sustained. So we are also grateful to the chairperson that he made sure that we meet today, you know, and try and find the way forward. Having said that, Chair, I have been partially covered on some questions prepared by my colleagues. However, I have a few clarity-seeking questions as well for both department and the film sector. In the interest of time, I'll just shoot to the questions. DG, on your presentation, it reflects 0 new approvals for new financial years while maintaining that the program remains open. Then how does the department reconcile keeping the incentive open in policy while functionally suspending approvals? Number 2, it also reflects that funds were shifted from the incentive during a period of the oversubscription. Then what strategic assessment justified the 1.2 billion via away from the film incentive? And was the long-term economic multiplier effect considered in that decision? Number 3, beyond halting approvals, what structural reforms have been implemented to prevent contingent liability from arising again? And how are you restoring confidence with institutions such as the ITC? And the last one for the department, of the 80 applications currently on hand, how many have been technically evaluated and are only waiting budget availability? And what criteria will determine which projects are prioritized once adjudications resume? And then to the film industry, it's clarity-seeking questions. Some were covered, this one was covered. You reference repudiations, ignored court rulings, and discrepancies between PAIA disclosures and annual reports. Can you maybe try clearly identify which actions constitute unlawful conduct and which are procedural disputes which remain under litigation, and have any of these matters been formally escalated beyond the engagement with the department? The last one will be in cases such as Meloshak, beyond the court ruling itself, have there been any enforcement applications, settlement discussions, or compliance follow-ups, and what is the current legal status of those matters? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Member Khoza.
Thank you very much, Chair. With respect to time, I'll try and be brief because I check now, we only have like 20 minutes. So let me take this opportunity, Chair, to greet the Minister, the Deputy Minister, and the DG, and together with their team, and also to the film industry for their presence today and their presentation collectively. Chair, it is very much concerning that such a high demanding sector, it's breaking down into pieces. Young people out there are falling into drugs because such a sector is failing to respond to pure talent that is being failed by such financial cuts and these constraints that the department is always faced with to respond to urgent issues on the sector. Chair will agree that this department attracts, or firstly, it creates thousands and millions of jobs, attracts foreign capital, also build cultural power and drive digital, creative economic growth globally. So one will agree with me that this is a sector that really also needs great priorities. It's painful to see the shifts of finances in this department as if it doesn't really matter, while we know the damages that perpetuate because of such actions that the department have put this sector into. But I think, Chair, you'll guide us in terms of recommendation that will be brought to the DTIC, because the committee needs to provide recommendations which we will then need to follow up on in terms of guiding this engagement. Firstly, Chair, as we have said, it's quite disappointing to note that such a sector is being failed on very basic things such as communication. And if there's no communication, then there's no interaction. So if the department fails to communicate with them, then there's no interaction. They will just come and drop off and just dump whatever they think is best for them without even knowing what really matters on their side. That one is also evident, Chair, after they've failed to respond on their email. The second thing is on the guidelines. The department comes and dump guidelines without even merely consulting to the sector to say, guys, this is a proposal, public engagement, as stakeholders, what really can be done in order to create an inclusive guideline that speaks to to your interest to improve on engagement and participation. So one, Chair, we are bringing forth that we need to get from the department as to how best are they going to improve on communication. What tangible strategy are they going to bring to improve on communication as we go out of this meeting? What communication strategies are going to be employed in order for us to deal with this issue of communication as they've stated today? And also it's disturbing that we hear from the presentation of the sector that there are perhaps officials in the department who happen to be arrogant or being problematic to the sector. Maybe perhaps if also we can get to know and understand as to who are those officials and what gets to happen to them. Because they've said it correctly that not all of them, but there are some. And at what level? Because if they are occupying, if they are senior officials, we can try to want to implement some of the solution-driven ideas. But if there are those officials who don't show interest in communicating with them, then it will serve no purpose. Who are they? And then how best do we then get to resolve on that question? So on communication, I will highly request that the DM or the minister speaks to that. And secondly, on the issue of guideline, Chair, can we perhaps agree on what was also recommended by the sector, that we establish working groups or we establish a committee that will then also have a specialist in it? We can bring components from the department, from the sector, and a specialist that will review and reform those guidelines. I don't think that is difficult. Let's open it up for them to participate and also share their own ideas and views. Then we bring it down into proper, inclusive guidelines. I think if we can get a response on that one, Chair, it can assist us in order to deal with. I didn't want to go into detail. How were they introduced? How were they imposed? And the disruption that they've caused by those guidelines, as they've stated. So let's just fix it by establishing a work group or a committee that will deal with those guidelines. And then, Chair, I think also we need to invest in investigating the 2020 and 2021 repatriations that were brought here, and also the inconsistencies that were reported in terms of the financial reports. If maybe we can get to understand as to all those rejections, what were the causes of them, and if the investigation can guide us on that. But Chair, briefly, I wanted to also bring to the attention of the minister and the DM that we understand that these are some of the issues that have happened a decade, half a decade away from 2020, 2021. But my understanding is that you are aware of these issues, and there's something that you've been doing to resolve them. More especially when we speak of the significant budget reduction, the fund shift that have occurred since 2020. My interest now is to understand from your side as to what concrete measures did the department implement to restore and stabilize the funding for the film and television industry, which has suffered substantial financial losses. My understanding is that maybe DG will tell us as to what steps have they taken to date, because it's not something that have happened last week or a few months ago. It's been over 5 years. Surely you will take us into confidence as to what have you done in order to restore and stabilize the funding for the film and the television industry. We heard you, DG, saying you will do this and that, but we get that. What have you done for the past 5 years in order to respond to those questions? And also, how does the department justify the diversions and the reduction of fund allocated to the film and industry incentive program, while the sector continues to face declining approvals, including 0 approvals recorded for the 2024 and 2025, and 2025 and 2026? And lastly, Chair, my question also will go to the department as to understanding what steps have they taken to compensate for the cumulative economic losses experienced by the industry stakeholders since the COVID disruption of 2020, particularly in light of reduced incentive allocation and the contingent liability constraints. If perhaps we can get to understand as to what is the interest and steps that have been taken by the department in order to at least compensate on that regard. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Member Kikaba.
Thank you, Chair. I greet everyone who has already been greeted. Chair, today's presentation seems to suggest a lack of coordination and liaison, and actually even subtle tensions between the department and the industry. I stand to be corrected. Otherwise, we would have had a common, actually, we wouldn't be having this meeting. If at all, we would have had a common approach on the issues which have been raised here. I think that's the first thing I want to highlight and to insist on a solution to deal with the administrative, to deal with the issues such as the administrative dysfunction that has led to this crisis, and to ensure that the backlog doesn't recur, that new applications don't get suspended and the adjudication panel is consistently convened. I think from what I heard from the department, there is a commitment to deal with those issues. And the industry is also equally committed to working with the department to resolve those issues. Perhaps what the minister can do is reassure the committee of maybe the timeline or way forward to ensure that these issues are addressed speedily without costing the industry any more economic harm. Because I think we all are agreed, we all acknowledge the economic rationale in terms of the multiplier effects and contribution to BBBEE and broader transformation of the industry. The role that it can play, that it plays. I think what we now are concerned about is finding resolutions to the issues that have been placed before us, so that in future, should we have a discussion again on the matter, there is a common approach. I think the worry is the industry could be set back in terms of its global competitiveness, given that indeed the global market is competitive, and the cost of restoring the global status of the South African industry could rise if we don't take steps right now. But perhaps, Chair, I also needed to confess, I once acted as King Herod at church. As King Herod, the villain guy. The villain guy. I once acted as King Herod in church. So I'm also conflicted
on this matter. But coming back to serious issues, I think other colleagues have asked the question about what's being taken to address, what steps are being taken to address all these other issues of the backlog, restoring the incentive program and so on. So I will not go in there. My further issue is working with industry stakeholders. I think it's imperative for the DTIC to commit to reforms of the incentive program, to address its flaws and ensure that it is administratively streamlined, it's adequately funded and can adapt quickly to the needs of the market. Mindful of competing demands, especially in terms of the budget, because in terms of the budget and other priorities, it's important that we continue to elevate the status of the creative industries and view it not just as an entertainment industry or a cultural expense, but view it in its strategic economic priority terms, which can help us resolve some of the challenges we face. I think in that regard, I will join the view that I don't think it should go to arts and culture. We will diminish its role and the contribution that it can play, that it plays. I think it should remain within this sector. The committee has, if colleagues remember, at the beginning of the term of the sixth parliament, has raised the issue of this industry, even in terms of a special economic, as a special economic zone, so that we are able to benefit from all the economic multiplier effects that it can have in terms of industrialization and so on. And so I join the colleagues. I think a number of issues which I wanted to raise have already been canvassed by honorable members. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know that, let me welcome Honorable Member Mkutu. I saw you when you were walking in. I know that there is an early departure request from Honorable Webster. I will now probably minister in the next 15, 20 minutes if there are responses. I know that some of the things might need to be written down like we normally do, but it will be important for the industry to hear you. And then we summarize so that at least by past we are able to give members time to grab something to eat in between with Parliament. Over to you, Minister and the team.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to honorable members, to the leadership of the industry, and to welcome the presentation that the industry has made. In many ways, it has also answered one of the questions that we raised in our presentation to the extent of allegations of mismanagement and malfeasance. Because as they were presented in the demands, our response was, please elaborate so that we know exactly what it is we investigate. And the DG did touch on the point that, in fact, so that we don't just go and look for malfeasance all over the show. It helps if we have specific allegations that we need to follow up on so that we can address them. And we certainly can commit to following up on the specific allegations. And the chair summarized, I think, in a manner that is quite useful in terms of some of the allegations that would need to follow up on. Chair, we're actually on the same side. We're on the same side to the extent that we believe that, in fact, the incentives program needs significant recapitalization. And specifically, there are programs that have had more negative impact as a result of budget reallocation. Excuse me. And those include the film incentive, global business services, and others. Sorry. And there's a rationale, of course, for why incentives were created for these programs, because the economic case was made for why you need the incentives to grow the industry and to help it contribute to the growth of the country's economy. So in many ways, we're on the same side. And we continue to raise the matters around rebasing the incentive program in the department. And that some of what happened was not as a result of failure in the department. Now let me explain it. And Dr. Kikaba would know a bit more than I on these matters. But in a situation where a program underperforms, Treasury responds by reallocating to other programs. In this situation, we believe that the reallocation was not appropriate. And we've continued to raise the matter with Treasury. So we don't suggest that reallocating to the social employment program on its own is wrong. It was a good initiative, and there's value. In fact, it's one of the best performing programs from a job creation point of view in terms of related programs, CPWP, et cetera, et cetera. It's one of the better performing ones. So it wasn't necessarily a wrong thing to do that. The question is, the film incentive was underperforming due to COVID. And naturally, it was underperforming due to COVID because you can't be shooting movies during COVID. And the budget was taken and reallocated to another program. And we've continued to argue with our colleagues in Treasury that we're not saying take away the money from other programs. We're saying it is important that you reinstate this program to the extent that the reallocation was as a result of extenuating circumstances that were beyond the department or the industry. So it's not something that we ourselves are not fully in support of. And I can reassure you that we've actively been arguing with Treasury around the resolution of this problem. Now, one of the requests being made, which is a very difficult issue to deal with, is but go back and reconsider applications. But if you consider the Deputy Minister's presentation and the DG's presentation, we were in a situation where we have increased contingent liabilities. It means that, in fact, the approvals have been done, the movies have been shot, but the money has not been dispersed because there's no money in the bank account. So every financial year, instead of approving new applications, we're paying the liabilities of those that we owe so that we are able to stabilize the situation. And the intention of reducing the contingent liabilities, of course, I mean, it's irregular expenditure on our side, so there are legitimate governance issues that we need to take into account. But also we remain concerned about the extent to which we've lost credibility in the industry for reasons administrative that have been raised around repudiations and so on, that are some of the issues that we'll look at. But our film industry was growing quite significantly, and it was disrupted. And you need to regain credibility, and the worst thing to do is to continue to approve and not be able to pay. So we continued with a decision that had been made that let's deal with the contingent liabilities and allow ourselves the opportunity to redefine and develop the incentive scheme going forward and ensure that it is sustainable. But it is more risky to have companies getting approvals and not being paid for years on end. And for us to make additional commitments without dealing with the backlog. So let's dispense with the backlog and rebuild our capacity from a financing point of view to be able to support industry. It's not an easy decision to make. It's a very difficult one, but I can imagine if, and the industry presentation covered part of that. It is difficult to be in a situation where you make an application, you have the production, and you await to claim, and when you claim, you don't get your money for years on end. That on its own is a serious problem that we need to deal with. So we need to resolve it going forward, and we are committing to work with industry to find solutions. And the chair has also pointed us to some of the areas, some of which we've been actively exploring. And particularly in areas where we could have grant facilities that we can access, we're exploring the opportunities to utilize the grant facilities. Of course, those are subject to their own policies and prescripts, but we're exploring whether as a short-term measure we can look at that and what the rules would that govern that would demand us to do. And even in there, I think there's value in sitting with industry and saying, these are the options that we're looking at. And these are the rules that govern these options. And we can together work out how we find a solution so that we're able to deal with the problem and define a clearer way forward. We directed the IDC to explore other options. So it wasn't intended to be disregarding industry. I mean, when you have a problem, you try and get your agencies to investigate solutions so that you're able to go to industry and say, look, we're looking at these possible solutions and we can engage. But it would be irresponsible of us to not do anything. So it wasn't intended to do anything else but to get the IDC to say, can we design blended financing models? What sources of funding can we get to do that? And what mechanisms can we look at to implement? We're anticipating the report in February, if I'm not wrong, from the IDC. And when we have the report, we're able to engage. So even we have not seen the report. So we can't say to you, this is the report and these are the results of the report. But as soon as we have the report, we'll be able to engage on the options. But I think the sentiment by the chair and members is let's all go out and find a solution. There was a question raised, how do you compare with other programs? I'm not always sure that we'll always be comparing apples with apples. We have to define support for different industries in different ways. Some of them we introduce tariff measures, some of them we introduce incentives, some of them we have countervailing measures, protection measures for particular industries. So we have to continue to support industry at different points to ensure that we're able to grow and support the industry. And I think the uniform sentiment has been that the idea of moving it to another department is not welcome. So I'm sure we'll take it off our presentation immediately. I think the idea has been thoroughly shot down today. So we won't raise the idea again. Safe to say that let's work with industry and find solutions. We don't have a magic wand. I'm not going to pretend like we have a magic wand, but we're actively looking for solutions. And we're ready to work with you. Thanks, Chair. When we started, we said DM is leading us on this particular program. So I'm sure he has wise words.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thanks, Chair. I was looking at the industry presentation about the number of engagements they've had with the department, including the request for engagement and so on. I had 2 meetings with industry last year. One was a virtual meeting. There were 26 participants from industry. One was an in-person meeting with all of them at the DTIC campus. The point they raised in their memorandum about a working group arose out of that meeting. And a lot of the issues that they raised here arose out of that meeting, including the question of what the ITC could do and the NEF. And we had a bit of an extensive discussion about what the constraints might be. The point that we're raising was that because these are financial institutions, they might require particular things to justify funding that many of our emerging filmmakers might not be able to put forward. So that's part of what became a drag on that exercise. In fact, there were some creative things that some of them raised as well, including drawing in some other private sector institutions and so on. The other issue that arose is what they are raising about the capacity administratively in the department, which leads to this backlog problem. Now, the question was raised, but I think the DG can get into the detail. How far have we gone in rebuilding the capacity of the unit from a human resource point of view? We have to address that. That has been a function as well of what the minister was talking about, the cutback on the part of the National Treasury on funding the posts in the department. But of course, that moratorium has been lifted. We now have to find a way to solve for that. The minister is correct. We are committed together with industry in revising the incentive scheme so that it functions optimally. And that includes moving away from one-size-fits-all modeling. Give you a case in point. I think Honorable Webster was making this point. A foreign film company might have the money to put together a production and might probably need a tax discount later on. But that can't be the same for an emerging film producer in South Africa. That person would require a cash transfer to enable them to set up production. So we are talking about trying to build the scheme such that it has those different tiers for different sized firms. That's one model. But the limitation we have, and this is why we keep raising the National Treasury thing, we don't set tax policy in South Africa as the DTIC. We might have a correct perspective on how we think this thing works, but we still need the National Treasury to come on board and approve that modeling. So that work is underway. let me illustrate this point better. I might be of the view that as opposed to giving a company 100 million rands, it would be best that I don't give them the 100 million rands, but the National Treasury discounts their tax bill by 100 million rands. If I were to do that, it saves me as the DTIC 100 million rands on my books, so I can allocate it to someone else. But it means the National Treasury will collect 100 million rands less in tax revenue. So the National Treasury has to agree with that model and say, okay, the incentive is going to be structured in this manner. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do it as a tax deduction on the other end, and that's how it's going to work. It would improve our life a great deal, especially for the major film products, especially the ones that are coming from outside. We would have more money to allocate to the domestic ones and then forgo money on the other end. The one point that is raised, which is very important, is the communication problem. And we've been stressing this point as well since we came in, that it's best to tell a person that I don't have something for you, as for them to be left guessing. And that seems to have been the problem that we inherited. Because if you look at the email issue with the guidelines, for instance, people say we sent an email on day one, on day two, and there was still no response. We can't even rationalize that point, Honorable Chair. It's an unacceptable thing. We will press hard for the department to do better on that. I think the same point, Honorable, because I was raising about the guidelines, and I think the other members raised it. You can't have guidelines that are springing up of nowhere and industries to comply on something that they didn't see. So we agree on that. We agreed that the department officials, as part of that exercise of working groups, must sit down with industry and workshop these guidelines. But also pose the question, when the guidelines were first contemplated, are they still relevant today? So that if possible, you can have a different set of guidelines altogether, produced together with industry. That's a position that we agree on. I think just a general point to make, it was Honorable Chance who raised this thing, and industry raises this point. The points being litigated by industry about the economic value of the film sector, it's a view that we share with them fully. We are not of the view that the film industry is less important than, say, the auto sector, for instance. That's not our view. We also have the good sense that it has such an impressive absorptive capacity across the cross-section of our skills profile that it is one of the most vital sectors to defend. Firmly share that view with them. And we have every intention to improve the situation, as the minister was explaining. Now, the chair raised another option about where money could be found. I want to say, Chair, your point is well taken, and that point is under exploration. But what we can't do is to say, because we're talking about someone else's budget, you can't say now, I'm going to go to this person and say they must give me this amount on their, but we still have to find a legally permissible way to explore other funding sources within the DTIC group. That is as far as I think we can commit on that point. It's work that is under consideration. But we have to be, especially because there's already been a lot of litigation on that front, you have to be careful on how you structure it so that it doesn't, again, blow back and you have the SIU returning to say what you guys are doing is actually illegal. So there's a lot that we are looking into. We will get out of here and have a structured framework of engagement with industry. I think that's the one important thing to raise. Out of here, the DDG responsible, together with the officials in the department and officials from our offices as well, are going to continue with the work that we started last year. If we must have monthly meetings with industry or quarterly meetings, let that be what happens. We will have that structured engagement, we will follow through on those things. And then we will also pursue the track that we're talking about to speed up the discussion with the National Treasury, to have finality on the structure of the incentive. We have to get that right and be clear, what does it look like going forward? The contingent liability issue is a And the minister explained how difficult it is. But we've made progress from the 2.1 billion rands to 463. We've made some progress. So it looks like we are almost at a third of what the problem looked like. The intention is to press it to zero so that you can, when you do the adjudications, you are not piling up a backlog that you have no plan of resolving whatsoever. So our intention is to run those concurrently, solve for the existing liability, but also get the scheme back online in a sustainable manner. I think we made that in the presentation, teach that what we're looking at is a sustainable format, not to clear the backlog now and come back 2 years down the line with another balloon backlog and you don't know how you are going to get yourself out of it. So that's the phased work that we're doing, but DG and the team can get into the other technical details. But the most important commitment is that we are going to regularize our interactions with industry to get around many of these things, including the points that the minister was saying. They are now starting to point us towards specific directions on the investigation. Whether is it maladministration, is it arrogance, is it this, that, and the other? We now have a clearer sense of what are the pain points. And we have a responsibility to follow through with them and provide the committee and industry with an indication of what steps are we taking to solve for those problems. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. I'm not sure DG might want to add just a few things so that we also allow the industry and then we conclude the meeting.
Thank you, Chair, and to Minister and DM for the initial responses. Suffice to say that the amount is 473 DM, sorry, not 463, 473. Chair, just a quick, very high level principle matters. All our figures, as I stated earlier on, to a very large extent, fully audited without fail annually as part of the AG process. And this one has got a PwC audited one as well, additionally. Secondly, the services sector contributes just over 30% of our GDP. And as a department, we admit that within the sectors branch, we don't have a services desk that is looking at this as well as other services within the economy, including GBS and other forms of service in this case. And we will look at establishing a desk within the sectors desk that will look at development and growth of the sectors as it were. Thirdly, Minister will undertake the investigation based on the information that we will have and ensure that we provide the necessary report to the committee as it becomes necessary. Collaborating with other government departments, including provinces, is part of an integral work ethic that we have as part of DDM and IGR, Minister, and I think we will ramp up the engagement with Department of Culture as well as the provinces in this regard. Chair, contingent liabilities become risky at the point that the contingency arises. It's not irregular. It is part of financial accounting. But the contingency here is that the budget must be available. And so when there is no budget, that liability cannot be met. And it's one of the conditions that are in the SOP and the rules and regulations of the incentive. And this incentive, to the extent that it's not a repayable loan, unfortunately, I have to differ with the industry, is a grant. Okay, it's an incentive, but it's a grant to the extent that you are not repaying it. By definition of incentives in the DFI environment, you have a grant portion and you have a loan portion, and it's blended finance. So I think let's also be clear about the terminology that we are using and how we are putting it forward. We are not referring to a grant as in a handout, but it's a grant by its nature, by virtue of the fact that it is not being paid back. Tax that doesn't, that would be negotiated with Treasury as an incentive. I think, DM, it's an engagement that we will have to the extent that if we don't have these incentives, there will be no investment and there will be no tax to collect anyway. And I think we are protecting fiscal collections that may not exist. And I think it's part of a national debate around incentives generally, in terms of how we incentivize industries in this regard. As we always do, Chair, the majority of these, we will provide written submissions in detail to the committee and within reasonable time. Suffice to say that in relation to staffing, having prioritized the reopening of foreign offices that had been previously closed for years, I'm told that this branch specifically only has one vacancy as far as I could work out the desk, and it is part of the next batch of approved posts that is currently undergoing job evaluation and will be advertised in the near future based on the recently lifted moratorium in this regard. Minister, I think with your permission, I will stand down. There's a lot more that we can still provide on, but I thought that high level set of answers would assist. Thank you, Chair.
Colleagues from the industry, just a few more minutes and we can conclude.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to start off by thanking the committee for making themselves present today and asking such informed questions. To the department, thank you very much for coming here and meeting some of our requests. I think that the important thing we've all gotten here from today is to collaborate and find a solution and a way forward. Just a couple of answers to the questions that were posed earlier around the reporting of these incidents and have we been to a police station. I think in the industry, well, I know in the industry, there's just a general fear of dealing with these issues for the form of victimization. But seeing as the industry has come to this stage, people have now come forward. So as far as we're aware, there have been no complaints lodged, although there have been court cases that have made a variety of allegations, which I don't think we've spoken to today. Moving the incentive, I think that it is important to understand the difference between the NFEF under DSAC and the DTIC. The NFEF's mandate in the NFEF Act is mainly directed around development and transformation. And film is one of those things that falls under a couple of areas, and the incentive program is there for the commercial value that film brings to the economy. And I think it's important to distinguish those two things. In closing, I think that we're at a place now where we just need a champion for the industry to bring out all the economic value that we have. And once again, I thank you very much for your time and hearing us today. We greatly appreciate it. And again, to the department, thank you for being here today. Sorry, one last thing I would like to clarify, just to the Honorable Deputy Minister Gutlimpi. I can corroborate that we did meet him twice last year. Our slides there were indicating our letters that were written, not necessarily our engagements. And that engagement did take place in the same week as the picket. So just so that we can clear that correspondence and that slide up. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Chairman. Yes, just to echo what the Chair said, thank you very much for the opportunity to come and ventilate these issues with the committee. And thank the Chair and ask for the opportunity to take the moment to try and highlight that we talk a lot about numbers and we talk a lot about a policy framework. And my brother often talks about policy certainty and the regulatory environment. And as a business person, I've never been able to understand it the way that I do now. And I'm really looking forward to engaging with the department and understanding how we can actually build this regulatory environment together, because we really believe that our sector is a patriotic sector, but we are here to solve a problem that we all face as South Africans, of our cousins, of our nephews, and we believe that we can be that solution for the country. Thank you very much, committee. We look forward to engaging. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, colleagues. I think we have had the member Langa. I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I thought maybe before the Chair closes, I think because here we are trying to find a way forward, I think it is important, since the industry had mentioned of the rot in the system, that if maybe in the engagement with the department, maybe if they share those names so that it makes it easy for the department to address such challenges. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Member Langa, we cannot make allegations in public. I think it will be very dangerous because those people might not be here to speak for themselves. It will be a bad culture. Let's not go that route. So,
Chair, I did not say here.
Oh, okay.
Rather, I said on the engagements
Okay.
between the department and the sector.
That's fair.
Yeah.
No problem. I think we're fine. So when there's a discussion, I think there's nothing wrong to say Honorable Masina is the one who did 1, 2, 3, and then the minister will be able to probably call the person to say there's this allegation, so that when there's an investigation, I think there's a fair process. No, thank you very much. I think, as previously mentioned, that the oversight role of the committee is to facilitate engagement between the stakeholders and the DTIC to find solutions that will ensure that existing jobs are retained and new jobs are created, and that there is inclusive economic development in the country. In cases of fiscal constraint, alternative or creative funding solution, it's an option that we are putting forward that it has to be considered, but we are confident that the minister and the department will be able to look into that. Based on the discussion today, we believe that there are some proposals on the table, and if further engagement takes place as undertaken by the minister and the team, we should be able to find a solution. Therefore, I think that we've laid a good foundation for engagement as confirmed by the minister. Secondly, as this committee, our role is to oversight and also to guide by the principle of separation. It's guided by the principle of separation of powers. While we cannot solve the issues directly, our role is to ensure that the department, working together with the industry, they sit together to resolve these issues. In this regard, we'll continue to have meetings with both the department and the industry players to ensure that there is an ongoing work to resolve this issue. And we welcome the commitment by the Deputy Minister, who's a champion, that there will be ongoing engagement and want to be updated, just that you have monthly meeting, quarterly meeting kind of, and as and when there is a discussion with regard to the sector, we'll appreciate to receive those periodical reports in Parliament. From the discussion is that this sector provides not only direct jobs, but also indirect jobs, particularly in the SMME sector. Therefore, its value should not be underestimated. This is one area that has been demonstrated, particularly between the two presentations and engagement. So there's a need to think creatively about funding and this sector, given the funding needs that have been articulated here. As hundreds of South Africans, including actors, directors, filmmakers, and those providing services such as catering, transport, clothing, security, amongst others, are affected, as demonstrated by the peaceful picket that we saw on the 28th and the 29th of January. Given the importance of the film and television sector for South Africa's economy, as demonstrated by the sector here today, there is a need to strengthen communication between government through DTIC and the stakeholders, including galvanizing other critical role players who could be playing a role in ensuring that the work of the sector is strengthened. There is also a need to resolve existing issues that have resulted in the sector's current position, including the resolution through investigation of the 2021 issues that have been articulated here that caused the repudiation that has been articulated here. It is important that the DTIC engages the industry in the matter of guidelines and eligibility criteria, particularly in relation to ensuring that the industry is able to comply. As this committee we have advocated for the support of the DTIC and its entities to go beyond financial support to include non-financial support to facilitate issues of compliance by the industry. We have on several occasions engaged on incentive of various sectors identified as critical for our economy. We acknowledge that there is a challenge with funding of incentives. Whilst we understand our country's fiscal constraint, the DTIC and National Treasury need to engage to ensure that there is a clear position that will provide certainty and improve investor confidence. In considering alternative funding options, consideration should be given to recapitalization through funds such as lottery fund, which should be explored, and other funding possibilities that are there in a manner as explained by the Deputy Minister, that everything has to be done within the ambit of the law. Both the department and industry have made recommendations that the committee has noted. In the context of the recommendations, we need to ensure that in your deliberation, at least we find common ground and we prioritize those issues that are critical so that we can ensure that this industry does not die in our hands. And finally, the film and television sector, unlike many other sectors, is people intensive. Therefore, it is important, given our country's high unemployment, that supporting the sector for purposes of job and economic growth becomes central to the work that we do. We will obviously continue as the committee to continue to engage, and we are happy that there has been a first step of decent engagement, including what the Deputy Minister has highlighted, that there has been some engagement. Now there's commitment to intensify those, and we'll be looking to ensure that there is a solution in this matter, and we urge both the department and DTIC to sit on the table to thrash out issues of disagreement. And we urge the industry to also assist the department by giving guidance, not witch hunt, to individuals. Guidance in terms of maladministration, corruption, if there's any other wrongdoing that is before. There's a term Member Chance used, I think I was hearing it for the first time, but it's something around malfeasance, but he said it in a particular manner. So all those things that they have to be put on the table. Finally, as Member Langer has said, that if there are names of people in your correspondence with the Deputy Minister so that he can prepare those people, it's important that we don't just go around accusing people, but we bring issues to the table and we're able to resolve them. I'm confident that this is a step in the right direction, which will see both the department and the industry working together. And let's try to sit through negotiations to resolve the problem. And we are thankful that there was that much that highlighted the plight of this issue. And as a committee, we'll always keep our eyes on the work that we do. Let me take this opportunity to thank the minister, the two deputy ministers, Deputy Minister Abrahams and Deputy Minister Kudlimpi, the DG and the DDGs, the colleagues from NEF and IDC who are here. And I hope that they will also have picked up that we are very serious about this industry and would like to pick it up. Thank all the representatives from the industry, different associations and bodies. Thank my colleagues from Portfolio Committee and the support staff. And we are confident that we will be receiving ongoing reports with regard to this sector. The meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you very much.